The housekeeper grabbed my arm so hard I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "Mrs. Aldridge," she whispered, and her voice had something in it I'd never heard before. Something close to fear. "You need to come with me. Right now, and you cannot let anyone see you." I stared at her. "Harriet." No, not Harriet. This was Dolores, my daughter-in-law's housekeeper, a woman I had exchanged perhaps 40 words with in 3 years of Sunday dinners and holiday visits. She was standing in the doorway of the guest bathroom at the Whitmore estate, where my son's engagement party was being held, and she was shaking. "Dolores, what on earth? Please." She looked over her shoulder. "There's no time." I don't know why I followed her. Maybe it was the shaking. Maybe it was 63 years of life teaching me that when someone is that frightened, you don't ask questions. You move. She pulled me through the service hallway, the narrow one that ran behind the kitchen, past stacks of catering trays, and a rolling cart someone had abandoned. My heels clicked against the tile, and she reached back and pressed my arm again, quieter, slower, and I understood. I slipped them off and carried them. She opened a door at the end of the hall, the kind of door that's made to look like part of the wall. It led into a small sitting room I hadn't known existed. Dark paneling, a single lamp, and a window that looked out, through a gap in the curtains, directly onto the garden terrace where the party was in full swing. "Don't let them see your face," she said. I stood to the side of the window and looked through the gap. My son was out there. My Elliot. He was wearing the gray jacket I'd helped him pick out, the one that made him look like his father, and he was laughing at something. That big, easy laugh he had. The one that used to fill up our whole kitchen when he was a teenager. And my heart did what it always does when I see him happy. It lifted. Then I found her. My son's fiancée was standing near the fountain, a glass of champagne in one hand, the other resting on the arm of a man I had never seen before. Not in a polite way, not in a hostess way. She was leaning into him, her head tilted, and he was saying something low, close to her ear, and she was smiling in a way she had never once smiled at my son. "Who is that man?" I asked. Dolores was quiet for a moment. "His name is Warren Finch," she said. "He lives in Asheville. He and Miss Serena have known each other for about 4 years. I turned to look at her. "I found letters," she said, "in a box in the storage room." I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the extra tablecloths. The box wasn't sealed. She pressed her lips together. I almost didn't look. I wish I hadn't looked. "What kind of letters, Dolores?" She reached into the pocket of her uniform and handed me 2 folded pieces of paper. My hands were steady when I took them. I don't know how. The first one was dated 14 months ago. It was written in a woman's handwriting, neat and slanted, and it was addressed to Warren. It talked about patience, about how long it was going to take, about how much his family's property was worth and how neither of them would have to worry after. There was a line near the bottom that I read 3 times before I understood it. "Once the ring is on my finger, it changes everything, legally speaking." I've looked into it. The second letter was more recent, 6 weeks ago. It talked about a timeline, about how the wedding needed to happen before a certain filing date, about how Elliot, she used his name, just like that, my son's name in her handwriting, had no idea about the Greenfield account, and that was exactly how it needed to stay. I stood in that small dark room for a long moment. "My husband has been gone for 4 years. I want you to understand that, because it matters to how I tell this. When you lose the person who has been your other half for 31 years, there is a specific kind of loneliness that follows you everywhere, even into rooms full of people, even into your happiest moments. My son's engagement had been one of those moments. I had stood in this same estate 2 months ago, at the announcement dinner, and cried the good kind of tears, and told myself that Warren, no, that Elliot, my Elliot, was going to be all right, that our family was going to be all right. And now I was standing in a secret room holding letters I could not have read. "How long have you worked for her family?" I asked. 11 years, Dolores said. "Since before her parents passed. I stayed on because I had nowhere else to go, mostly, and because the work is honest." She straightened. "What she's doing is not honest, and your son seems like a decent man." I folded the letters carefully and put them in my evening bag. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "I need you to act normal for the rest of this evening." She nodded. "I've been acting normal for 11 years, she said quietly. "I can manage one more night." I went to the hallway bathroom, the real one, with a lock on the door, and I sat on the edge of the tub and I called my son's college roommate, a man named Gene Beaumont who had become an attorney in Atlanta, and who was one of the 3 people in the world I trusted completely. It was 8:47 on a Friday evening. He picked up on the second ring. I read him the relevant portions of both letters. There was silence on his end. Then, Meredith. He used my full name. He only does that when something is serious. Where are you right now? The Whitmore estate. The engagement party. Is she there? She's on the terrace. And Elliot? Also on the terrace. My voice cracked a little on his name. I swallowed it back down. Jean, she mentioned a filing date. She mentioned an account he doesn't know about. I need to understand what she's actually trying to do. Send me photographs of those letters tonight. Do not confront her. Do not tell Elliot anything yet. He paused. Do you hear me on that last part? I hear you. I need 2 days. Maybe 3. If what you're describing is what I think it is, you confronting her at a party does nothing except warn her. Will you give me 2 days? I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. 63 years old, silver hair. Pearl earrings my husband gave me for our 25th anniversary. The face of a woman who had spent decades learning that patience is not the same as weakness. Yes, I said. 2 days. Driving home that night, I replayed every interaction I had ever had with my son's fiancée. And the thing that struck me, the thing that made my chest tight in a specific, nauseating way, was how little I actually knew about her. I had asked in the early months, politely, where she'd grown up, what her family had been like, what she'd done before she came to Raleigh. She was skilled at answering questions without answering them. I had chalked it up to private nature, introversion. Now I understood it differently. My son called me the next morning while I was still in my robe. Mom, you left without saying goodnight. Everything okay? I got tired, sweetheart. It was a wonderful party. She looked beautiful, didn't she? I looked out my kitchen window at the backyard where Elliot used to play, the old oak tree he'd tried to build a fort in when he was 9, and I said, she's a very striking woman. There was a pause. That's not quite the same thing as what I asked. I know. I made my voice soft. I'm just tired, baby. I'm proud of you. I'll talk to you this week. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee going cold in my hands, and I thought about what it means to love someone enough to wait. To not run toward them with every terrible thing you know, because running toward them now might be the thing that loses them later. My instinct was to get in my car and drive to his apartment and put those letters on his kitchen table and let him see exactly what was happening. But Jean was right. A warning given too early is just a warning she can prepare for. Jean called me 41 hours later. Her name before she came to North Carolina was Serena Weil, he said. Before that, in a courthouse in Knox County, Tennessee, she was married. The floor felt strange under my feet. Married, to a man named Dale Coffey. They married in 2019. There was no divorce filed in Knox County, no annulment that I can find in any adjacent county. He let that sit. Elliot would be husband number 2, Meredith, while husband number 1 is presumably alive and not divorced. I sat down on my kitchen stool. The Greenfield account she mentioned. I had a colleague pull some property and probate records. Your son owns a partial stake in a commercial property in Greenfield, through his father's estate. He came into it when your husband passed. It's not liquid, but it's valuable. If a spouse petitioned for division of marital assets under certain circumstances. It's not a simple case, but it's not impossible either. She married him for a piece of Leonard's estate, I said. My husband's name in my own mouth felt strange just then, protective. Like I was saying it to warn him, even though he was 4 years gone. That's my read, Jean said. I've got a contact at the Knox County Clerk's office pulling the original marriage certificate. I want that in hand before we do anything. How long? 2 days. 3 at most. He paused. Are you all right? I'm trying to figure out how to tell my son that the woman he loves is already married to someone else. Yeah, Jean said quietly. There's no good way to do that. The certificate came through on a Tuesday. Jean drove up from Atlanta himself. He sat at my dining room table with a folder and a legal pad and walked me through everything. The marriage was real. The county seal was real. Dale Coffey had been contacted by Jean's colleague on a pretextual matter, and the man had confirmed, unwittingly, that he was still married to a woman named Serena. Still waiting, he said, for paperwork she'd promised to send him years ago. She just left him, I said. She relocated, changed her last name back to her maiden name, moved across state lines. Not illegal on its own. But the bigamy exposure and the fraud angle with the property, those are very different matters. We called Elliot that evening, not to his apartment. I asked him to come to my house, and when he pulled into my driveway and came through my back door, the way he always had since he was 12 years old, I felt something break open in me. He was in his work clothes still. loosened tie, the way his father used to look on Tuesdays. He kissed my cheek and sat down at the table and saw Jean in the folder and stopped. "Mom," he said, very quietly. "Sit down, sweetheart. I'm not going to recount every detail of the next 2 hours. Some of it belongs to him, not to this story. I will tell you that he did not cry until he was alone in my guest room later that night. And I will tell you that I stood outside that door for a while, not going in, just being there, the way I used to stand outside his room when he had nightmares as a small boy. Not to fix it, just to be near. What I can tell you is what he said at the table, after Jean had walked him through everything and Elliot had sat with it for a long time in silence. She talked about the Greenfield property once, he said. Just once. I told her about it when we were first dating. She said she thought it was beautiful, commercial real estate with history, her words. He stared at the table. I thought she was interested in my life. I thought she was interested in me. He looked up at me. You knew something was wrong, he said, the first time you met her. I saw it. I hadn't said anything, because she had done nothing wrong yet, and because I had told myself it was grief making me suspicious, making me protective past reason, making me see shadows where there weren't any. I had talked myself out of my own instincts. I should have said something sooner, I said. You couldn't have known, Jean said. I knew something, I said. That's not nothing. Jean coordinated with a contact in the district attorney's office. I want to be clear that I did not pursue this out of anger, though I would have been entitled to anger. I pursued it because bigamy is a crime. Because what she had done to Dale Coffey, just left him, stranded in a waiting room of a marriage with no closure, was cruel. Because what she had intended to do to my son was premeditated. Because Dolores had worked in that house for 11 years and deserved to not spend any more of her life in service to something corrupt. They went to speak with Serena on a Thursday morning. I know because Jean called me after. She had been at her home, the estate that was not actually hers, that belonged to a family trust she had been systematically misrepresenting her authority over, which was a separate matter that emerged later. She had answered the door in tennis clothes, apparently, ready for her 10 o'clock lesson. She was not able to keep her 10 o'clock lessons. My son called me that afternoon. His voice was different, quieter in a way that wasn't sadness anymore, more like the particular quiet of someone who has passed through something and come out on the other side still standing. It's done, he said. I know. She asked about the property filing, he said, when they were talking to her. That was apparently the first thing she asked about. Not about me, the property. I didn't say anything to that. You were right, he said. I'm not glad you were right, but I'm glad you told me. I almost didn't, I said. I almost decided it wasn't my place. It's always your place, he said. You're my mother. I've thought about that a lot since, whether it's always your place, whether loving someone gives you the right to intervene in their life, or whether it's something more than love, whether it's the particular duty that comes from being the person who has known someone since before they knew themselves. I don't have a clean answer. I know that I spent 2 days sitting on the worst information of my son's adult life, because the right timing mattered more than my need to act. I know that I stood outside a sitting room window in my stocking feet, holding letters that made me feel sick, and I made a decision to be patient, and the patience helped. I know that Dolores sent me a note 3 weeks later. Just a card, simple, from a drugstore. She had found a new position, she wrote, with a family in Greensboro. Good people, she said. She thanked me for what happened, in that careful way people have of thanking you for something that cost everyone something. I put the card in the drawer of my nightstand, next to a photograph of my husband. Leonard, I thought. You would have seen it right away, you always did. Elliot had dinner with me last Sunday. He brought a pie from that bakery on Elm he knows I love, and we sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours. And he told me about a work project he was excited about, and I told him about the garden, and at one point he laughed. That big kitchen laugh. And the house felt full again in a way it sometimes doesn't. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and he looked at me for a moment. I'm going to be more careful, he said. Next time. You will be, I said, and I'll be right here. He hugged me the way he's hugged me since he was big enough to reach around me, and he went out into the evening, and I stood at the door and watched his car until it turned the corner. Some people call what I did interference. I understand that. I've heard it from people who found out what happened, who said a grown man has the right to make his own choices, even wrong ones. And they're not entirely wrong. But there are choices, and then there are traps. And when you see your child walking toward a trap, You don't stand at a polite distance and wait to see what happens. You move, even in your stocking feet, even if it costs you something, even if the only window you have is a small one, with a gap in the curtains and you're not sure what you're going to see. You look and you don't look away.